Hello all, I'm Sai and in today's video, I'm bringing to you 10 standalone fantasy book recommendations. As I said multiple times before in my channel, my most favorite genre is fantasy, and the only problem for me when it comes to fantasy books is that most of them belong to series and it is quite hard to find standalone fantasy books. Despite that, if we do a little bit of research and just surf through the internet, there are a ton of standalone fantasy books that are available. Based on my reading history, I've already published 2 other standalone fantasy book recommendation videos before in the past 2 years. So there are 20 recommendations which are already available in my channel, and I've linked both of those videos in the description. So do check them out if you are interested. And in this video, I have a fresh batch of 10 more standalone fantasy books to recommend to you guys. So without any further ado, let's get into the books right away. The first book that I'm recommending today is a standalone fantasy which is also YA. And it is kind of high fantasy, but it feels like urban fantasy because of the light feeling that the author keeps on maintaining while narrating the story to us. And it is also based on Indian mythology. The book is Star Daughter by Shweta Thakrar. I read this book last year and it was quite surprising for me because I did not hear that many positive reviews for this book, and many people said that it was very underwhelming. I went in with quite low expectations into this book, and I should say that I was super astonished because I had such a fun time reading this book. Now, this is not anything that has high stakes in it, and it is just cozy and feel good at the end of the day. And more than anything, the best part about this book is the sweetness that the author maintains while narrating the story for the story as a whole, as well as for our main character here. So here we follow Sheetal, who's half star and half human being. Her mother is a star and her father is a human being. And just a few years after her birth, her mother had to get back to the celestial kingdom called Swargalok in this book. And after that, Sheetal has been growing up with her father alone. There is this distinct feature alone which makes her stand out from the rest of the population. It is that she has stark silver hair and she keeps on dyeing it continuously just in order to not stand out that much. While she's about to turn 17, what happens is she accidentally ends up harming her father, and in order to recover him, she has to bring back pure star blood from Swargalok, otherwise her father will end up dying. How Sheetal as well as her best friend go to Swargalok and whether they get the star blood back to earth in time is the actual plot of this book. It is very feel good and it has the right amount of relatable things for a book that deals with Indian culture without overdoing it in any way. So if you want a standalone fantasy which is different from the Western ones and has quite a chunk of Indian mythology properly utilized in it, you should definitely try this one. The second one is a translated Japanese book, and this one leans more into magic and realism than fantasy. Still, I'm recommending it here because it has a lot of fantastical elements that are woven through it, which just makes it feel like such a good standalone fantasy book. And it is The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Natsukawa. I listened to the audiobook of this one and it is very short. It's just around 6 hours long, and if you listen to it on double speed, which most people do, you can finish this in just a single sitting as I did. Now here we follow our main character, who's this little boy that has been brought up by his grandfather, and his grandfather owns this used bookstore. The book starts with the death of the small boy's grandfather, and after this the boy is to be taken care of by one of his aunts and he has to move places. And before he moves there, he has to pack up the store and go with his aunt. While all this is going on, what happens is, out of nowhere, there is this stubby cat which just comes and talks with the boy. The cat actually literally talks with him, and it says to him that the cat and the boy will be traveling through this portal in the bookshelves to 3 different places, and they have to save books from 3 different people in these 3 different places. So basically this short book is divided into 3 small parts, and in each and every part the boy and the cat together go forward and end up saving the books of the world. It is such a feel-good book. It is slightly emotional, at the same time super easy to read. You're probably a book lover since you're watching this video, so I think this would be perfectly apt for you. Next, I'm going to recommend a super popular book, and I'm sure that in all the standalone fantasy videos that are out there on BookTube in the past 1 or 2 years, this book has taken its place and it is also totally worth it. The book is Legends and Lattes by Travis Patry. I ended up reading this book last year only, and I have not read the companion for this one yet, which is also kind of a prequel, but you can read this as a standalone because the story wraps up really good towards the end of this book. Now, before talking about the plot of this one, I just want to say that if you're a reader, if you love coffee, if you love chocolate, and if you just like cozy places, trust me, this will just be a heaven for you, as it was for me, because the basic plot of this book is just the construction of a coffee shop and how our main character Viv, who's an orc and has had a very dark history, gives up that career and decides to open this coffee shop in a place where people don't even know the existence of a substance called coffee. It is very cozy, and it also has certain dark elements that are shown throughout, But more than anything, this book is about companionship, it's about coffee, it's about just following what your heart wants despite you thinking that it might be too late, and all the good things that it might draw into your life. I just felt super good after reading this book, and I cannot wait to read that companion or prequel for this one because I'm sure that it will give the same amount of cozy vibes that this one did. So if you have a question whether this is worth all the hype that it is getting, trust me, it is totally worth it. Next we have a middle grade fantasy book, and it is also not that much popular, but I ended up liking this book because again it gave me such a warm feeling while I was reading it throughout the time. And the book is Tamarind and the Star of Ishtar by Jasbir Bilan. Now this author has written like 4 other similar books just like this one, and I'm going to recommend the other one also just in a few more minutes. Now basically in this book we follow our main character Tamarind, who's born to an Indian mother and an English father, and she's been grown up in England only. But all of a sudden her mother dies and she does not have any tie with the Indian side of her family who live in Punjab at all. Her father ends up remarrying, and during her father and her stepmother's honeymoon, Tamarind is to spend a few days in her maternal grandmother's house. How she's totally reluctant to spend her time there, and what all gets revealed to her about her family as well as some of the magical powers that her mother had in the past. It is quite emotional because it shows us the grief that a child is experiencing after the death of her mother and experiencing that side of her family for the first time. But it also weaves in the fantastical elements that are supernatural in its tone for the story really well. There's also the sibling slash cousin dynamic that is shown in this book, which is very cute. And despite it being a children's book, I'm sure anyone who reads this will be able to emotionally connect with it no matter what. So just go forward and give it a try. Next up, I'm going to recommend a book which I personally did not like, but I think many people might be interested in reading it because of certain things that it has, and also because of the fact that it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but in a gender-bent way. And the book is The Beauty of the Wolf by Ray Delaney, in which we see the roles of the Beauty and the Beast swapped here. So basically the Beast here is a woman and the Beauty is a man. In the beginning of the book, we see this king who ends up accidentally cutting down these trees in a magical forest, and the witch or goddess who's responsible for the trees inside the forest curses the king, saying that the child born to him will be so attractive that anyone who sees him will be totally falling in love with him, and at the same time that child will bring up the doom for the kingdom. Just as he was cursed, his son is born, he's very attractive, and everyone, no matter what their gender is, gets attracted to this child. And parallelly, what we also see is there is this monster or beast-like creature who's born as a result of an experiment and is being locked up in the basement of a house, and how both this prince as well as the beast, after getting released from the places that they are confined to, get into the world and meet each other, and all the things that happen between them is the actual plot. The reason why I did not like this book is because it had some weird sexual stuff going on, and it just made me feel so uncomfortable. Despite that, I think it was a good attempt of showing the Beauty and the Beast story in a gender-bent font. So if you're interested in something like that, you can give this also a try. Next we have a really tiny novella, and it is Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee, who's the author of The Green Bone Saga. Now I have not read that trilogy yet, but I wanted to get the taste of the author's writing, so I went forward and listened to the audiobook of this one. I suggest you to go with the audiobook also because the physical version of this one was way too expensive for a novella. And here we basically follow this group of people who have this ability to tame these huge birds and become their riders. How we see our main character here ending up becoming one of those riders for this huge birds is basically the plot of this entire book. How certain things have happened for the main character's family while she was a child, and how all those have affected her relationship with this bird, and what kind of relationship she develops with the bird, and how the birds are not always under the control of the human beings even though it seems like they are tamed by them. It is really well done, and if you ask me, more than anything, the things which I liked about this book are the human and animal companion relationship that is shown really beautifully to us. At the same time, the author makes us clearly understand that human beings are human beings and animals are animals. We can coexist and we can be friendly with each other, but at the end of the day, the true natures of both will come out, and we must be ready to accept it as such, even though it might be heartbreaking at the end of the day. It is such a well-written tale, and the writing of the author is just out of the world in this one. I think the audiobook was not even an hour and a half or 2 hours long, and I enjoyed each and every minute of it. The next one is another middle grade fantasy book, and I was very skeptical about reading this book before I picked it up, but I was proved so wrong for the thoughts that I had because it was really well done. For a children's fantasy book, I did not expect this one to be so good. Okay, and the book is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. Now this is a fantasy book in which we see this witch who takes this child as an offering each and every year from this little village. And the village people are thinking that the witch is taking the children and just killing them or doing something with the children. But what the witch has actually been doing is she takes the child from the place. She grows up the child by feeding it starlight and all the nutrition that it deserves, and ends up bringing the child to a couple who are childless in another part of the world. There's a total misunderstanding that has been going on from the witches and as well as from the people of the village. And when our main character, she is Luna, is left off in the forest one day like that, the witch takes her from the forest, and instead of feeding her starlight, she accidentally ends up feeding her moonlight, and the moonlight ends up giving Luna all these different kinds of powers which start manifesting in her life little by little when she's a child, and they almost get out of control at a point. I'm just saying like a very basic plot of this book, and there is like so much more going on despite just the single plot that I said, and all of them have been really masterfully managed by this author and brought together towards the ending of the book. And trust me, once you finish reading this book, you'll not be able to stop your heart from melting because it will be so warm and sweet, and you'll just want to give this book a huge hug. Next we have another YA standalone fantasy, and it's by an author whom I have recommended already. The book is The Dream Runners by Shweta Thakrar again, who's the author of Star Daughter, which is the first book that I recommended in this video. Now, after reading Star Daughter, I felt so bad for the book as well as the author because it was such a sweet book, and because of some things that were not marketed well, I think the book does not receive all the appreciation that it deserves. So after reading that book, I just wanted to read everything else that the author has written. And during that point, there was only one other book that was released by that author, and it's this one. And I should say that this was not as good as Star Daughter for me because I had kind of higher expectations on the author after reading this one. But this was just as equally sweet, even though it's a bit darker in its tone compared to Star Daughter. So in this book, we follow our two main characters, Tanvi and Venkat, who are basically living in this Nagalok. And Tanvi is this dream runner who goes forward and, collects dreams from actual people's lives. And Venkat is kind of this magician who's able to bring out certain things into physical reality out of the things that the dreams have given to the people. That's basically all I can say without spoiling anything about the book, but it is also heavily politically driven for a YA book if you ask me, and it is also really well done by the author. We also have a twin thing going on here which will just make you feel so emotional because the sibling dynamic there is also properly done by the author without, overdoing anything or underdoing anything again. The best part about this author's writing personally for me is the fact that she does not overuse Indian culture or, make it feel stereotypical in any way. She just uses the right amount of stuff that is necessary to make it feel authentic and Indian without overdoing anything. Despite the author being born and brought up in the US, it was just fun to read, and it is quite a big book, so you can take your time and read it slowly, and I'm sure you'll have a really good time. And next we have another middle grade fantasy book, and this is also by an author who I've recommended already, and the book is Aarti and the Blue Gods by Jasmeet Bilan, who's the author of Tamarind and the Star of Ishtar. I want to read the other 2 or 3 books by this author again. And here also we see our main character who's this young child, and she's been growing up with her aunt in this lonely island. There are only 2 people in that island, one of whom is our main character, this little girl, and the other one is her aunt. Now her aunt has a very abusive relationship with this child, and in the beginning of the story, out of nowhere, because of a freak accident, the aunt ends up dying. So this little child is caught all alone in this island, and she has to survive there. She also knows that she cannot survive there for long because she cannot go out and get food from outside in the island once winter comes. And during this time only, out of nowhere, what happens is, in the sea, she sees this boy who's been wrecked, and both of them stay together in this island, and they plot to get out of there because they know that they cannot stay there. And once the boy gets out of the island, he'll be able to save the girl too because he has a family out there waiting for him. What all happens with these 2 kids trying to escape the island is the actual plot of this book. Again, this one is very deeply emotional, and once you read the book, I'm sure you'll be able to understand why it is that emotional. And the Blue Gods part of the title of this book is the thing which is fantastical about it because it includes both blue gods from India as well as some other countries of the world. So it's basically Krishna and some of the other gods who are said to have blue complexions across different mythologies in the world. So just go forward and try it. I'm sure it will be good, but it will be quite emotional at instances because again, it deals with this child who has lost the only parent that she has had from her childhood, despite that parent being abusive to her. It is quite emotional, but it will be totally worth your time. And at last, we have an Indian mythological fiction that also has a lot of fantastical elements that are woven into it. And the reason why I'm recommending this at last is because it has the least magical elements into it, but it does have a lot of other fantastical elements which can be very blatantly seen when combined with mythological fiction. And the book is Karna, the King of Anga by Kevin Missel, which is the first book inside the Karna series. And again, you can read this book as a standalone. That's the reason why I'm recommending it in this video. I was able to read this book and just be satisfied and content with the story while I read the last page because it ends up in a really good note. Here we basically see the story of the Mahabharata, but from the point of view of Karna, and it is also reimagined by the author in a totally different way, okay? So basically, Karna is the hero here. His princely Kauravas are also protagonists and the Pandavas are the actual antagonists whom we see here. There's also this really different way in which he creates a relationship between characters which we have not at all seen before in any other kind of rendering of the Mahabharata in any other media. The only thing this book lacks, if you ask me, is world building. And if there is world building in this one, it is easily mythological fiction at one of its best ever. And of all the mythological fiction books that I've read, I think this one is one of my top favorites because it just explores the mythology of the Mahabharata properly without giving the grayness of the characters and using them properly. I can just keep on talking about this book and spoil it for you guys. So I'm just going to stop here and say that go forward and read it. You'll definitely not regret reading it because it's simply excellent. So yes guys, those are all the 10 standalone fantasy books that I wanted to recommend to you today. And if you have any other such standalone fantasy recommendations, please do let me know them down in the comments so that I as well as the other people who are looking through the comments can get some more recommendations. And don't forget to check out the other standalone fantasy recommendation videos from the description because there are 20 other books waiting for you down there. And if you did find this video useful and enjoyed it in some way, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share it to your friends. And if you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.